Hi there. In this video, we're going to go into some basic facial animation stuff. Everything from eyelids to the basics of facial expressions and how to basically break down the simplicity of the animated take. Now, what is an animated take? I guess I'll begin there because that is, of course, the project for this week. I'll go ahead and consult my friend Dash from The Incredibles. Um, you've probably seen and you know what a take is, especially you know what a double take is, right? When a person sort of looks at something and then looks away and then looks back again, like with more of an expression. Basically, the basics of a take are you start with a sort of neutral face, you hit a sort of closed face where you're in a transitional point. Think of that as almost your anticipation, and then you change your expression. Now, a take does not necessarily have to always be a surprise. Sometimes it can be a character going just from one emotion to another emotion. So this might be a character who is happy and then they get really angry, or obviously maybe they're just kind of minding their own business and then they do get surprised. So there's different emotions that you can do with this. Don't just think of a take as, everybody always thinks of it as, oh, it's a double take, so the character's always surprised. But it can be more than that. It's really just an infrastructure that you can work around. If you remember, we've kind of mentioned this a little bit in 3D Animation 1, but what animators do, our job, is to take complex motions, simplify them, and then take whatever's left over and exaggerate it. So that's what you're seeing here is basically Dash is, this is a scene where he's running, obviously, and then he comes to a realization. So I believe there's a water coming up in front of him, if I remember The Incredibles right. So awesome stuff there. But really, what is it then that goes into making a take? If we were to just even pose this out really quick, I'm just going to use the grease pencil. You'll have to pardon my. I'm using my mouse and my mouse pad. It's seen better days, but I'm just going to show you real quick. Like you could have eyebrows that are kind of neutral, right? And you've got your eyeballs, and they're going to be pretty straightforward there. And then maybe you've just got a neutral mouth, right? Now, when you're going to do a take, your eyebrows will probably contort down. Your eyes will likely shut. They're going to kind of clamp down. And then your mouth even might compress, move up, and even in a little bit. And then, of course, when you're going to another face. The other face could be literally anything. I want you to understand that. But generally speaking, it will be not as compressed as your anticipation pose. So this is your sort of anticipation pose. This is your neutral, wherever you're starting from. And then, of course, where you're going to end up. So I guess I'll call this the end pose. So nay, don't. I'm not even going to say it. I'm not even going to say it. Don't say that twice, though, is all I'm saying. So, this one, maybe you'll have a more expressive, maybe the eyes get really big, right? You can have your character go crazy, and they're like, whoa, nuts. So, obviously, you go neutral, you contort, and then you expand. Maybe that's what the E stands for as well, is expand. So, this is the core pieces of what a take is. Now, a double take, basically, the only difference there is you have a neutral pose. Your character looks at something, looks back, and then does this. So it's just a very slight, like they might go from this to almost like 10 or 20% of this pose, and then revert back to neutral, or go from here to 10 or 20% of this pose, then hit this, then hit the full expression. So they're almost beginning to look because they just start to realize it, and then they hit that compression and then expansion. So those are sort of the core pieces to what makes a take. So for the rest of the face here, we're going to dig into a little bit more of the different pieces of the face. Personally, the way I like to separate it out is the lower half and the upper half. So the eyes and brows are one chunk, and the lower half, of course, the sort of nose and mouth, is another chunk. That's how I think of it anyway. So what you do here with your mouth and everything, that can give you quite a bit of your expression. But to be honest, all of your expression, let's say the vast majority of it occurs up here. So you're going to get a lot of expression up here. If you took the mouth completely out, like a lot of people think like, oh, well, when you're smiling or frowning, that's when you know what the emotion is. But you can do quite a bit with the brows and tell, how happy or sad somebody is. So if I do this, you can, go ahead and put your hand over the mouth right now, and you can kind of look like, yeah, that character doesn't look happy. And what's funny is if you start to, change these things around and say, well, what if I make him happy with that brow shape? What does that look like? You start to turn the nerve curves off, and you can you can start to see some deviousness going on. So you can really get some interesting facial expressions with combining different things. So you can have a smile with the brows down. Maybe you can have a frown with the brows up. Right? Like what might that look like? You can start going this way and then say, well, maybe I want that corner of the mouth, and it's like, oh, something like that. Or just even this. You can kind of take both corners and bring the mouth down. Maybe the character's crying. It's sad. Do that kind of thing with the, they're about to break out crying. You take the eyelids here, and they're very sad. But I want you to understand that these are the concepts, right? We're just sculpting. At the end of the day, that's really all we're doing. And if I were you, when doing facial animation, especially starting out, but honestly, you never lose this as a trick. A lot of animators, we keep a mirror nearby our desk. It's fairly helpful because you can kind of look at yourself and do various shapes and expression changes and things and see specifically what your face is doing. Because ultimately, you may not know, at least intuitively, right off the bat, what our faces do. So, obviously, it might be a good idea to really analyze that and slow your brain down a little bit and think about what expressions, what pieces of the face move when you create certain expressions. So that is a pretty important part. When it comes to, I'll just touch on the brows here real quick. Obviously, this is your sort of furrowed brow. Makes sense. But there's more that goes on than just up and down, right? Like, what happens, if you get this, you get more of that worried look. Obviously, out, you're going to get more surprise. So it isn't just up and down. It's also sort of in and out. And, obviously you can go too far. This looks like, I don't know, Rocky 3 or something. Cut me, Mick. So, you got to watch out for this stuff. Don't go too crazy. Again, just because you can do something does not mean you should. So, same with the squash and stretch. Obviously, that can give you some problems. So, for the eyes, I mentioned this in the previous video a little bit, and I want to touch on it more now. When you move your eyes, as it turns out, if you look down, your eyeballs don't have this much white above them, okay? If you're trying to animate a character in a real sense, when your character even moves from here to there, okay? Not even that much. Like if I put in a key, I'll just show you real quick how to do this, but like I'm going to leave these back at neutral. I'm just going to go over one frame, okay? Because usually this is what would be known as an eye dart. So if I do something like this, so our character is going to be looking, and then boop, just a quick like, what was that kind of thing, where the eyes kind of dart down. Now, if you do this, you don't want the eyelids to just stay static, and they will stay static unless you mindfully say, oh, I've got to fix that. So if your eyes are in a position that you're already happy with, let's say you do want them to look like this at 62, at 63, you don't leave them here. You got to go ahead and maybe bring the upper lids down slightly. So now, even if it's over one frame, you get this. See how that feels a little bit more fleshy? It feels more realistic. It feels like the lids are now part of the eye, as opposed to when you just kind of, well, we'll get rid of that. This is what it was before. This looks like the character is like freaking out right now. So this does not look as realistic as this. Subtle difference, but that is the stuff that when layered in, when you're doing something like a take or even just acting, that adds so much character and realism. And it's little attentions to detail like that that will make your work stand out and actually make it feel more alive, which ultimately is the goal, as it turns out. So I did want to touch on the eye dart. You could spend so much time. There could be separate videos just on eye darts and things like that. But right now, for the purposes of this first week of this class, I want you guys concentrating on the bulk stuff, the main poses. If you want to add an eye dart before you do your take, that's perfectly fine. I might even do that in an exercise video here. But I want you guys to be thinking about sculpting the face and knowing that when you do something, that these things are connected. So like even when you move the eyes, like let's say we start here and I dart my eyes, maybe I dart my eyes like way over there, okay? Now, by even doing this, if your eyes go from 62 here to 63, you will probably lower your eyelid. You might even, I know this is kind of crazy, but you might even lower your brows a little bit. Now I want to make sure I key that at 62 and 63 so you get this kind of thing. Or you can go the other way. So you go here, up with the brows. And actually, this could be its own micro take, believe it or not. You could look with your eye, and your brows could actually, over 2 or 3 frames, raise. So they go like this, and even go down before they go up. But of course, the amount that they go up has to be reasonable. So I'll cut that in half, see how that goes. So it's like boom, like that. And you can even slow in. So you could say, maybe I want to hold that for a few more frames. I'll take 64, middle mouse onto 65, and now you'll ease into that with the brows. They kind of slow into this now. Boing, up like that. And you can do that even with the lids. So let's say with this right here, maybe you go a little bit more with the upper lid. Maybe you push them down a little bit more, and then over 2 frames, you kind of bring them back up a little bit. So you get this kind of, the lids go down and then open up slightly more. See how that kind of all feels now? Like it's all together. And adding these little nuanced things to your face. Now I'm getting a bit, I'm kind of showing you where you can end up. Because again, this is like where you will be adding polish. But I want you to know that it is in the polish stuff that you'll start to see how the face works together. It's not like the brow is separate from the eyelid. They are all connected. So I really wanted to kind of show you that very quickly in that little example. So, as you are posing the eyes, moving the eyes around, or even, moving the lids around, that when you even do this, you may want to consider a very slight brow, on your blinks or something. So, and maybe we can talk about blinks real quick. When blinking, as a benchmark, you're probably going to want to start, let's say, at like 60. I'm just going to throw the key right here. Over 2 or 3 frames, you'll then close the eye. Now, a lot of people, when they're doing their blinks, they like blink the eyes at halfway. Our eyelids actually close like something like this. It's like 20 or 30% on the lower lid moving up. It's really not like halfway. Now, this, just because it has the capability to do that, does not mean that that's actually what a good blink looks like. So you actually want this to probably be favoring the bottom side by quite a bit. So you've got a key here and you've got a key down there. What you want to do is hold that key for 2 frames and then open for another 3. So go here to 60, middle mouse onto 67. You'll see you get this kind of thing. Blink, like that. Now, is it done? No, because actually, when we blink, our eyes don't actually... We'll kind of key this here, and we'll kind of bring this over there, because that was when... So we'll key this all together. So I'm just hitting the S key, grabbing all the eyes and the eye control here. So our eyes actually have a tendency to want to stay slightly visible as we move from a blink into and out of a blink, basically. So when we come out of this blink, our eyes will kind of come up like that. See that? Doesn't have to be huge. Like sometimes I'll see people do this and they'll be like, bring the eyes way down there, and it looks like the eyes are like, this looks a little crazy. If your eye opens and you see that, it's like, what is going on? So now if you're doing an eye roll, maybe that, that can serve you in some cases. Maybe the eyes are up here. And you get this kind of like, this, and then the eyes come down. So maybe you'll bring the eyes further over one way like this, and then, you get this kind of like, what? But usually as you're closing, you'll start to move in that direction. So you'll actually start that way. It'll go like, what? Like that. So I want you to kind of see. Hopefully, you're starting to understand these pieces that you'll put together that make up an expressive face. Because again, this is its own rig within a rig. The whole face you could spend so much time on getting used to it and having fun with it. So, I encourage you to play around with this, make your own. Find a sound clip from a movie that you like, and just take like a short clip of it and try mimicking that clip. See if you can capture what a character's expression is if you think of something funny. So I wanted to touch on that. Of course, with the lower half of the face, we've been concentrating right now on the upper half. There's a lot going on up here, obviously. With regards to the eyes, one other thing I wanted to mention is if you have the eyes looking in a particular direction, just know that they have extreme positions, and technically, just because you move something like way out in a direction does not mean that that actually looks correct. You may have to modify certain things to make it look natural, to be honest. So depending on how things go, just because an eye can look in a particular direction does not mean that that's actually aesthetically correct. You may have to take one of these and move it a little bit further over just to make it staged toward the camera more correctly. So, a lot of the time people will take this and they'll move it out like so, but this kind of makes the character look like they're not looking at anything in the distance. So if you want a little cheat, take this and move it slightly inward, and take the other one and move it slightly inward. And now it looks like our character is looking at something. They're focusing on something. Now don't go too far with it, because if you go too far, then it's like cross-eyed. But a little bit either way. Like, doesn't have to be a lot. Maybe if you even have them just replace each other in terms of this control, that actually can be enough that the character now looks like they're looking off into the distance at something, rather than basically the eyes just kind of dead, blankly staring into space. So you want your character to look like they are at least visibly looking at something. So our eyes are not like dead center looking straight out. We tend to focus in on things. So our left eye and right eye are they're going to be angled slightly inward. So be very careful with that. Don't just leave it as the default. So now the lower half of the face, some of my favorite stuff here. In the other video, I gave you a quick orientation of this, but I want to make sure you understand also that there's a little bit of a jaw hinge that you can use rotation on this, but all the rest of these are basically transform based. So, you're going to have to, obviously, again, get comfortable with how this stuff works. With regards to the mouth, it's almost self-explanatory. You know what the mouth does when you open and close it and things like that. But, when it comes to smiling and frowning, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, to be honest, because just because you can do something with a rig does not mean that that's a good idea. So, you can crank that all the way to 11 on both, and it looks kind of crazy. I would not suggest doing this. The same rules apply in facial expressions as it does with basically body posing. Asymmetry is a good idea. Don't just grab the eyes or grab the brows and say, I'm going to crank these up all the way. That looks uniform. You don't want that. Our faces should be slightly asymmetrical when it comes to a pose. So maybe do something like that, where one brow is higher than the other. Maybe one eye is more squinty than the other. You can start messing with this stuff. Go with something like that. But with the mouth, don't make it so both are the same. Take one and kind of go a little bit more natural this way. Don't crank that all the way to 11. Maybe go a little bit more subtle with that, and try stuff out. Do you want your character to be like, ee, something like that? Who knows? Or some cheesy smile? You can do that. This is a guy named Chet. I don't know why. That just seems like a guy named Chet. Apologies to anybody named Chet. You can play around with this. And if you want to make your guy look a little crazy, raise the lower lids and create a lot of negative space above the iris. That always makes your character look crazy, by the way. So if that's what you're going for, you can do that. So those are the mouth controls. Just so you know, real quick, when it comes to the pucker, you're going to look at this and go, it doesn't work. It's not doing anything. Here's how it works. Grab the mouth controls and make the mouth completely narrow, like all the way in on both sides, okay? And we'll even zero this out. Close the mouth, and I'll zero these out as well. So how does the pucker work? Once you are in a narrow on both sides, you can then add the pucker. That's how it works. So it only turns on when you need it, which is generally when your mouth is at full narrow on both sides. So, and be careful. Yeah, that looks amazing. But you can kind of get some good stuff going on here with this. And there's a little bit of mouth tilt that you can get away with. Again, too much, and it does start to shred in on itself. So, you know, use your eyes to fix the mouth. So play around with that. Again, when it comes to, just to finish this off real quick, when it comes to the teeth, you know, if you're looking at this and you're going, I want to add, you know, an expression where the character is like yelling or something like that. If you're using the squelch to stretch the face down, you know, like that, with the mouth open, you have to then fix the teeth. So here's what you do. If you have to push them in slightly so it doesn't go through, do that. Just touch it up. But you have to key before and after that pose and on that pose. Because otherwise, if I move the teeth, like let's say I move the teeth in like that, and then I go to a different pose, now the teeth are back permanently until I tell them to go back to where they were neutrally, which is that. So you have to kind of plan this stuff out. And again, organization is key. So anytime you, let's say you know, close the mouth and you're like, okay, I want to go neutral. Maybe I'll close this. Now, if you decide to go with a squelch, right, and you go with something like that, that's fine. But, you know, teeth might be an issue for you at some level. Maybe you start pushing this in or whatever, I don't know. But, or maybe you go with a squelch like that, and you want to create that pose, but you're like, ah, man, the teeth are going crazy. You know, it's not a big deal if you just touch that up. But again, you have to make sure you key it, and you have to make sure that you keyed it before you moved it and after you moved it, so that it's back to neutral, so that, you know, for the rest of the face shapes, it's fine. You just want it on that particular point in time that it doesn't go like this. Don't do this, because this, you know, if that starts happening, I mean, it's kind of funny. It's, you know, skeleton man, or maybe this is like a weird looking creepy mustache. That is a pretty creepy mustache, to be honest. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully it gets you acclimated to what is capable, what the face is capable, rather, of on this character. Because so there's quite a bit that you can do, quite a bit that you can break, as it turns out. But again, organization is key. So to actually just completely wrap this up, if you've been using the face button there, that should grab every single control, which allows you to then, you can kind of piece this stuff together. For myself, sometimes I have a face control, which grabs everything. And other times, depending on if I'm doing a lip sync, and when I say lip sync, I mean basically, well, you guys know what a lip sync is probably, but when it comes to animation, if you have a sound clip that you are animating to, I will generally create a separate button for the lower half of the face, which I'll basically call all of these, and then I'll make a separate button for the upper half, which is basically the eyes and brows. So those things I keep separately because, well, the brows and the mouth can technically act separately, even though they're fairly similar. Obviously, they're both on the face, but they can react offset from one another, and it still can work perfectly fine. Because obviously, when you're talking, your mouth is moving a ton, like you're going blah 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 blah, but your brows aren't like moving up and down with every single word that you say. That would look crazy. So the brows are kind of more sedated, I guess, when it comes to expressions. We kind of hit poses with our brows, and then our mouth does a bunch of, you know, shapes, obviously, to articulate the things that we say, and sometimes not very well. So thank you again. I'll wrap this up and talk to you in the next video. So peace.